Welcome to RC Pylon TV. I'm Don Stigall, and this video is about using epoxy fillers to fix dings and to fill in gaps. And in this case, I'm working on some molds for an Estrellita EF1 and the Shark EF1. They share the same fiberglass components. I've made a hatch, and I have quite a few places where the surface coat had bubbles in it. The turtle deck has some spots in the fillet, and I could make the molds directly from this and people could deal with it, but I'm going to fix the molds and have them right. And on the wing fillets at the back, I didn't get the surface coat all the way into the cracks. This video is a multi-purpose video. I make videos to show how I do things. I don't do it to show off. I just like to share information. I do it in the software world. I believe in collaboration. And I also, because of my work in the software area, I've come up with an equation, and it's O equals MFU. Output equals motivation times facilities times utilization. Now, maybe I've been motivated to get this done over the last few weeks, maybe not. But one facility I didn't have was time. I was working on a software release at my job. Another purpose for this video is to show the use of different fillers. StigallHobbies.com has 8 different kinds of fillers listed on Amazon right now, and they come in 4-ounce and 8-ounce sizes. And a lot of people are discovering Cab-o-sil. Cab-o-sil is a great component to mix in epoxy when you need to turn the epoxy into a paste. It's called thixotropic. I'm also going to be using micro-balloons because micro-balloons are sandable. However, micro-balloons by themselves are not very thixotropic. They'll stay runny and they won't go where you put them unless you're using them in a glue that's already thickened. You can buy a whole bunch of specialty glues, or you can buy the epoxies you need and buy the fillers. And ours are very reasonably priced. We have a sampler kit with Cab-o-sil, quartz microspheres, microfibers, and cotton flock. And we have a complete starter kit that adds wood flour, milled fiberglass, wood flour, and phenolic microballoons and carbon fiber. And I think I repeated something there, but I'm going to leave it in the video anyway. I'm making this video because I've got to get this done. People want parts. And while I got the basic stuff done, I've got to get them finished and get final molds made as soon as possible. With epoxy fillers, you can fill dings, you can repair mistakes made in hardwood, and while laser cut kits are great, lasers don't typically cut at an angle, and when you're fitting parts together that like form a turtle deck or something like that, you're going to have gaps, and you need to fill those gaps. You can use putty, and putty does fine for some things, but for other things, if you use it properly, micro balloons mixed in enough volume with just enough Cab-o-sil to make it stay in place is a very sandable filler. And that's what I need here. The first part is preparation. Everywhere there's a little gap in here, I need to fill it. But if you fill in the gaps, you can feel that they're smooth because the surface coat didn't have anything to sit up against. If I try to put filler in this and then try to sand it, the filler may come out. So preparation is a big part of the project. If it's something simple like a ding in a wing or an extra hole drilled in a firewall, you can easily do that without a lot of prep. I'll show how to do that in future videos. This is not going to be a short video. I'm going to videotape the whole process and I'll edit it down some. But I want you to get the feel for how things work best. Because this has got the most spots on it, I'm going to go ahead and tackle it first. And I'll be using a Dremel tool. I need to get a cordless because I've ground carbon fiber with this one, and carbon fiber plays havoc with the brushes in this model of Dremel. I'm going to start out with a tapered grinding stone and see how that does. If that doesn't go well, I'll go to the carbide grinder. And I wear contacts, and you should wear eye protection anytime you're doing stuff. And this lets me see what I'm doing and how I'm progressing. This tip is working quite well on this surface coat, so I'll probably continue to use it unless I have a bigger need here. I have a compressor in my garage, and I normally keep a can of compressed air up here. in my workshop so that I can blow things off without having to blow and suck in stuff. And by the way, I should be wearing at least a paper mask, but it's hard to talk for a video and I don't breathe. While I'm grinding. Now, that looks pretty messed up, but with the magic of epoxy fillers, within a day or two, it'll be primed and painted and ready to make a mold from. This is actually a plug to pull clear canopies off of. I have one that was made from the outside of the hatch that I have to finish laying up. Well, it turns out that funky blue surface coat I made up using some neon pigment is actually easier to see the flaws in than the black is. So I'll keep that in mind when I make future parts. The grinding's done, and I don't have an air compressor up here, so I'm going to take an easy route and use some 91% alcohol. By the way, 91% alcohol does wonders on microwaves and ovens, and when you're doing housekeeping, 91% alcohol is your friend. Another thing that's your friend when you're dealing with epoxy is acetone. One of the components of epoxy is acetone, and acetone breaks down epoxy better than alcohol or denatured alcohol by far. When you're filling something in the middle of a part, you prep it and you smooth it over it, and it's no big deal. But in this case, I have sharp edges, and if I try to just puddle it on there, that's what I'm going to get, is a puddle. So what I'm going to do is use some tape and form a barrier that I can put the epoxy down up against. And I may not get this right the first time. I may have to do a second filling. Be strategic with how you make your barriers. And then be gentle when you put the filler up against the barriers. I'm going to show you how to mix the filler so that that's pretty easy. In this case, I've got to put it down in the slot, and I'm going to use a disposable epoxy stir stick. There can be an art in how you make your barriers. You're effectively making a mold on the fly. In this case, I'm using masking tape. And I've got a couple little spots right here I missed while I was grinding. And I'm not going to try to form a barrier on that. I'll just grind away what I don't need. I'll use a little bit of excess. In the case of this, there's only one place that needs a barrier, and that's back along the back side of the hatch. I didn't get the surface coat in there well enough. Now we get to what you came to the video for. I'm going to use some West Systems 105 resin with 206 hardener, which gives me a 20-minute pot life. I may have to do multiple batches, but since this is a demo video, and the thing I need to do is get my fillers ready. This is Cab-o-sil. Don't breathe it in. And this is white quartz microspheres, also known as micro-balloons. And one reason I developed these packages the way I did is so that it's clearly labeled. The jars are clear. You can see when you need more. And I used to have a little red spoon that I got from a Baskin Robbins, and I called it the magic spoon because a lot of my recipes were based on that little red spoon. You can use Z-epoxy, Bob Smith epoxy. You could even use a thickened epoxy as long as you're careful about what it's thickened with, because if it's thickened with something that's hard to sand, even if you mix in a lot of micro balloons, it's still going to be hard to sand. When you're using epoxy fillers, mix the resin and hardener thoroughly before you try to start adding the fillers. If you don't, the thick consistency that you may wind up with may make it impossible for you to get it fully mixed. It's hard to find unwaxed cups these days, and these only have a mild amount of wax on them. But this stick has a square end and a round end, and I can get down in the corners, and with these polyethylene stir sticks, which I may start including with some of the fillers, if you wipe it off while you're using it, you don't have to worry about breaking off hard epoxy, and you can use it between batches. And I have artist spatulas for doing the fine work with. And what I'm going to do is get a spoonful of microspheres. a full spoonful did not even start to make it bulked up. I want this to be highly sandable, so I'm going to add another spoonful. Now this is bulking up the epoxy. And it still runs, even though the volume of epoxy is more than double of what it was when I started. And I'm going to go for another half a spoon. I want to get as much micro balloons as I can get in. See, it still sags, even though we've mixed in quite a bit. Now the trick is to use just enough Cab-o-sil to get it to the desired consistency. You can also use microfibers, but microfibers strengthen epoxy, and Cab-o-sil basically doesn't strengthen it. It doesn't weaken it a lot. And now I have almost a non-sagging paste. So I'm going to use another half a spoonful. And as you do this, you get used to the ratios. And it's a feel thing, just like flying. If you don't do it very much, you won't be good at it. And even if you're putting ARFs together, the wings on ARFs often have gaps in them. And if you just use plain epoxy, you're not going to fill those gaps in the wing halves, and your wing may fold. So there are a lot of uses for the fillers. If you're flying model airplanes, you need epoxy and epoxy fillers. And you need to learn how to use them. And I will do my best to teach you what I know. And I'm sure somebody will have suggestions. And I'll listen, because that's what I do. Okay, I now have a completely non-sagging paste, and I'm going to do a couple of the easy parts first. Just to get the feel for how much epoxy I need. And to get my touch. It's okay for me to put extra on here because this will be an easily sandable mixture. So it's better to have enough than not enough and have to do it again. And I meant to put down some plastic to protect my work area, and I'm going to do that right now before I start getting epoxy all over stuff. After you've got your epoxies mixed up, put the tops back on them. One enhancement I'm going to add is I'm going to start putting labels not only on the jar but on the tops, so you don't get the tops and the jars mixed up. So that part has so I have that part done. Next I'm going to do the wing fillet mold because it's got some pretty big gaps in it. And when you're working with the fillers, it's best to smooth them out as best you can. And with these masking tape barriers, I can only do so much. But one thing you can do is scrape away any known excess. Because excess Just has to be sanded off. Or ground off, depending on your mixture. And there's another part done. I don't have to worry about it getting on the table. So on this piece, I've got a lot of filling to do. I'm going to start at the back. And I'm going to have to puddle up some of this because some of these gaps are pretty large. But as you'll see, sanding it will be no problem with this quantity of micro balloons. Now I'm going to be priming this, and minor imperfections won't be a big deal, so I can scrape away most of the excess, except on the big areas where I have to puddle it up. Don't be afraid of leaving a little bit of extra because, like I said, micro balloons are very sandable, and the amount of Cab-o-sil we added won't make them too hard to sand. And I've been going for close to 20 minutes now. My epoxy may start to get hard on me. And while you want to scrape it down, you don't want to have to do the job multiple times. It's better to have a little bit of excess than have to do another filling. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Like I just stuck my hand where I had added some filler. So you're going to make mistakes. It's just like flying. I have to admit, I haven't been flying as much over the past few years as I used to. I started flying control on speed in the 70s. Actually, I started flying control on speed in the late 60s, half A control on speed. And when I was 13, I made my own plug for a half A proto airplane. My dad produced the Stigall minnows, and the Stigall minnows were very popular, so my mother and I laid up very many of them. I wound up doing a whole lot of it myself. So I've been working with epoxy and fillers for a long time, and I'm sure there are plenty of techniques that I don't know. Feel free to comment on my videos. Feel free to comment on my forum postings. Some people think I have thin skin. I wouldn't still be doing what I'm doing if I had thin skin. But I started flying full scale in 1995. I got Microsoft Flight Simulator and another program called Flight Unlimited, and I bought a yoke, and I learned to fly aerobatics using the instructor in Flight Unlimited, and I learned to fly ILS approaches on Flight Simulator before I ever even flew in a real airplane. And on my first flight in a Cherokee 140, it was marginal VFR, visual flight rules, and my instructor told me to get my head out of the cockpit because I was flying on instruments. I had to learn that from Flight Simulator. But you've got to know the basics. And that's why I'm doing this video, is to get this work done and to help you get started with the basics. Now I can really puddle this up because this will be an easy sand, and I want to make sure that I get my gap filled. So sometimes you weigh the effort it's going to take to do the sanding versus using a little bit of extra filler. Now in this case, the material I'm putting the filler in is actually a lot softer than the filler I'm putting on it. But if you're filling balsa, you need a really high micro-balloon content. And you may want to consider using phenolic micro-balloons that are brown for filling balsa because they seem to sand easier than the quartz microspheres. I'm using the quartz microspheres so I can see easily what I'm doing on these parts. And as you'll notice, I'm going back over some parts that I had scraped down because I've decided that it's going to be easier to sand this than to redo it. And I don't want to have to redo it. And because I've got it so thick, I can actually form a nice big area where I had that big gap. And I'm sure it looked like I was making a big mess with the grinder. But as you see, it didn't take that long to fill it. With these artist spatulas, make sure you get them clean. You can get them at Michael's or most any Hobby Lobby or that kind of place. You're looking for the ones that have a little bit of flex in them, have a nice wood handle, and clean them very well. Otherwise, you'll wind up with one like this one that's got epoxy all over it. And what I'm actually going to do to make sure that particular spatula is clean, because I like to have one that's really clean, is I'm going to use some acetone. Even though it wiped mostly off of the surface, there's still some on there. And now my spatula is completely clean. My mixture is completely non-sagging thanks to the Cab-o-sil added to the micro-balloons. And I'm going to do one thing. I thought I was through. I'm going to use the dirty spatula for this. Because this little area back on the back is sagging just a little bit, I'm going to add a little bit more Cab-o-sil and really thicken it up in one spot. And see, now it's really thick. And I'm going to make sure that I don't have to redo this, because I can use some 80 grit paper and take that right off of there. And while this is not my clean spatula, I'm still going to use the acetone. I recommend having at least 2 spatulas. I recommend buying these stir sticks. I'll be selling them on Amazon. You can also get them through CST Sales, or anybody that sells West Systems products. Even West Marine carries them. If you need epoxy, West Marine carries West System 105 and 206, 207, 209 hardeners. So get the epoxies you need, the fillers you need. Enjoy building and enjoy flying. Happy landings, and thanks for watching.